Welcome back. Well, there was smoke and fire, there was suspense and melodrama, and in the end, elections matter. Brett Kavanaugh will be a Supreme Court justice. Democrats can complain all they want about the week-long and deliberately limited FBI investigation into sexual assault allegations against Judge Kavanaugh. But in the end, 2 of the 3 Republican senators who were hedging announced that they would vote to confirm. So did one Democrat, Joe Manchin of West Virginia. Joining us for more are Democratic strategist Gabriel Hammond, Connie Bruni of the Sarasota Republican Party, and Jacob Ogles of SRQ Magazine. But first, with our poll question tonight, here is our digital producer, Chloe Conroy.
Alan, a few hours ago, we posted the following question on our Facebook page. Who do you think will be more motivated to vote in the midterms because of the Kavanaugh confirmation? Do you think it's the Democrats or Republicans? 52% of our Facebook viewers say the Democrats will have more motivation compared to 47% saying the Republicans will be more motivated with the midterms. So what do you think? Coming up later, I will show you some of the comments of what people are saying on our Facebook page. Alan, back to you.
All right, folks, let's start our conversation here. I'm wondering what your initial impressions are. Gabriel, we saw over the last week Jeff Flake from Arizona, who really, in all the suspense you could imagine, said that he would only vote for confirmation if there was this FBI investigation. It is what it is. The question was whether Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska would hold out. And then all of a sudden we also have a Democrat, Joe Manchin, who is in the re-election battle in West Virginia. What were you thinking today as this was all playing out?
Well, before we opine on our personal opinions on whether Kavanaugh should be sent to the Supreme Court or not, let's drill down into the quantitative, the numbers, the facts of public opinion on this confirmation process. Comparing it to Anita Hill a number of years ago, more people did not believe Anita Hill than did. Compared to Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, more people believe Dr. Christine Blasey Ford over Brett Kavanaugh. How does that play out on a partisan basis? 80% of Democrats believe Justice, or soon-to-be Justice Brett Kavanaugh should not be confirmed. 80% of Republicans believe he should be confirmed. But here's where it gets interesting. No party-affiliated voters.
But as I said, Gabriel, elections matter. The Republicans won, Democrats lost, and Connie, welcome to the trapezoid. Let's get your reaction. The polls do say that most Americans are not supportive of this nomination, but as I said, elections matter.
I support the nomination. I'd like to know if anyone at the table's ever been a victim of sexual assault.
Well, I have.
Right.
Certainly I have not. I think it's a relevant question.
It is, because it goes to the heart of the whole situation, of what it was there. Do we believe this person? Do we not? I do believe that Dr. Ford was the victim of a terrible experience. I listened very carefully. I watched her on television like everybody else in the country. But I'm not convinced that it was actually this individual.
Okay, so Jacob, that really is what it gets down to a lot of people. You could argue, if you want, about the limits of the FBI investigation, but it's awfully hard for these senators in the situation that they were in to vote whether, for this nomination and take into account the sexual assault, if there was one, without that kind of evidence after 30 years.
Well, the age of the allegation has certainly been a part of this, but I think there's also something about the nature of what we're talking about. This isn't a criminal investigation. This is not a matter of somebody bringing criminal charges or having a defendant's rights violated in terms of Brett Kavanaugh. I imagine there's a lot of people who can have a lot of sympathy for Brett Kavanaugh in this situation and still think his credibility was undermined throughout this whole process.
We are just getting warmed up. Our conversation on the week in Washington will continue. Welcome back. We are talking about the week in Washington, and joining us for more are Democratic strategist Gabriel Hammond, Connie Bruni of the Sarasota Republican Party, and Jacob Ogles of SRQ Magazine. So we put this question in a poll that's on Facebook right now. You can go onto our Facebook page and vote on it. Who is more likely to be motivated to vote in the midterms because of the Kavanaugh nomination? And the early results are 52% say Democrats, 48% say Republicans. Connie, are you surprised by that? Because over the last couple of days, we have heard about how Republicans are now renewed in their enthusiasm.
I would agree with you that the Republicans are very, very motivated to get out and vote. If they were bored before, they're definitely not any longer.
Gabe?
I would say the Democrats are unbelievably motivated by this. I mean, there's so many stones that were left unturned by the FBI in terms of allegations against Brett Kavanaugh, so that's going to continue to be a dark cloud over the Senate and over virtually every partisan election in the country.
Gabriel, we're going to drill down on the races here on the Suncoast right now, but what have you seen in your travels comparing Democratic enthusiasm and Republican enthusiasm for the midterms?
Asking me, right. Well, I think that you're seeing a lot of growing enthusiasm among Democrats, but you're also seeing a lot of entrenching with Republicans. I think in terms of how this particular high-profile story is going to affect things, this is a matter of winning in the Senate means losing politically in the midterms. The stakes just are going to get astoundingly lower for Republicans 24 hours from now after the Brett Kavanaugh confirmation has been already done. So there's reason for Democrats to remain angry. There's not as much at stake for Republican voters anymore going into the midterms when we don't have a Supreme Court seat for grabs anymore.
Meanwhile, I've seen reporting over the last couple of days saying that, usually, especially with the midterms, the Republicans are much more organized. They have their ground game really working for them. Adam Smith from the Tampa Bay Times said that for the first time, it appears that the Democrats are more organized in terms of the ground game than the Republicans are, Connie.
I would tend to agree with that locally. I've seen that because I was at the polls on Election Day during the primary, and I know that the Democrats are, to their credit, very organized. I will say this about this particular issue. Supreme Court, Supreme Court, Supreme Court. It's the number one thing I said to my friends during the presidential election. If they didn't like Trump, all I said was Supreme Court, Supreme Court, Supreme Court.
And frankly, Gabriel,
here it is.
That's what the Republicans said all along here. And Democrats, this was all out there. But Democrats were not motivated to come out in 2016 because of the possibility of the Supreme Court.
Well, the pendulum swings both ways in the political realm. And looking at the numbers, for the first time in decades, more Democrats have requested absentee vote-by-mail ballots than Republicans. That's a monumental figure. Here locally, over the last 4 weeks, there have been very well-attended canvass drives for both Margaret Good and David Shapiro.
Yeah.
I have organized a few of them. The first one, we had 65 people in attendance, and we reached over 800 doors. I don't know of any of the Republican events going on that weekend. And then 2 weeks later, Manatee and Sarasota County joined forces, and we had nearly 100 people in attendance and reached over 1,000 doors. So there's a lot of energy this year.
Okay, we are just getting warmed up. Our conversation on the Week in Washington will continue after a quick break. Stay with us. Welcome back. We are talking about the week in Washington, and joining us for more are Democratic strategist Gabriel Hammond, Connie Bruni of the Sarasota Republican Party, and Jacob Ogles of SRQ Magazine. But first, what are you thinking? Our digital producer Chloe Conboy is tracking our comments. Chloe.
Alan, here's what some of the viewers are saying about who they think will be more motivated to vote in the midterms after the Kavanaugh confirmation. John wrote this on Facebook. The election will be a referendum on Trump, given Trump's 60% disapproval rating. The results on the morning of November 7th won't be pretty for the GOP. On the flip side, Peter wrote, I'm an independent and I've always been in the middle, but after the disgraceful stuff the Democrats have done, I'm going to re-register as a Republican. Democrats should be ashamed of themselves. Again, we encourage our viewers to go to the ABC7 Facebook page and comment your thoughts. Alan, back to you.
Thanks, Chloe. So let's continue our conversation here. But here's the thing. 1 month ago, the Democrats had an 11-point lead in the generic ballot. The generic ballot is put generic Republican against generic Democrat. Who do you want to see control Congress? That lead is down to 2 points now, Gabriel. How do you explain that?
Well, to be perfectly honest, I dismiss that poll because when you're polling a congressional race, you need to take the poll within the boundaries of the district.
That's fair.
Not nationally.
That's fair.
And right now, there's a very competitive race in Congressional District 16 in Florida, which is between Vern Buchanan and David Shapiro. It encompasses Hillsborough, southern portion of Hillsborough County, Manatee County, and Sarasota County.
But I know you're going to take issue of this, but a new University of North Florida poll came out this week showing that Vern Buchanan has a 9-point lead. 538, the national website, now gives Vern Buchanan a 90% chance of winning this race.
One thing on polls, Gwen Graham was going to be the nominee on the Democratic ticket for governor. So I'm not looking at polls that closely, particularly ones that are publicly released, and particularly ones that are released by campaigns. I looked at that poll very closely from the University of North Florida, and they've only polled one congressional race in Florida in the last few years, so they have no track record polling congressional races.
Jacob, I want to ask you about this, and we were looking at the poll here, again, the University of North Florida poll showing Vern Buchanan 49%, David Shapiro 40%. We still have several weeks to go, and our air on ABC7 and other media outlets are basically besieged by ads from both Vern Buchanan and David Shapiro. It is one of the most hotly contested races in the country.
Yes.
But what do you take of both the generic poll we were talking about, and there were actually two polls this week that indicated that Congressman Buchanan has a substantial lead?
Yeah, there was another one from St. Pete polls that had Vern Buchanan at 50, which is very significant because if you get 50, guess what? You've won. I think, to be perfectly honest with you, when I'm on the ground talking with people and checking out social media and just feeling what it's like in the air, I think there's some momentum behind David Shapiro's candidacy and his campaign. It really feels like he's building something, but I don't know right now, based on the polling that's come out, if there's enough room, if there's enough track, if you will, for him to catch up with Vern Buchanan. And that's a problem. If Vern Buchanan has already shored up half the vote, then everything that matters. David Shapiro could swing every undecided voter his way and still lose.
So, Connie, we've talked to a number of senior-ranking Republicans in the Sarasota Republican Party and elsewhere over the last couple of weeks who are concerned about that race, and all say this is really going to be tight, and they're saying that Congressman Buchanan may be basically enslaved to the national mood right now, which has been very difficult.
The national mood, I'm in 17, I should tell you that.
That's okay.
I'm not in 16, but...
That race is a whole other story.
Yes, it is, a whole different story. But in general, when you talk about the generic ballot and how that is narrowing, you're seeing the same thing. We're in a country, obviously, based on what we saw today, even in the vote on cloture, extremely partisanly divided. I think you're going to see the same thing here.
But you also saw in House 72 last spring a lot of Republican women cross over and not vote for James Buchanan and vote for Margaret Good for a lot of different reasons. And is the concern that the same thing is going to happen in a couple of weeks?
Well, this is two men. We'll start with that. So it's not the same. And we're actually dealing with very different candidates. I think Gabriel's point is very well taken. You have to look at the individual candidates when you're looking at this. Vern Buchanan is a definitely larger-than-life individual who has done a good job, and I think that voters are going to reward him.
Gabriel, what's the strategy here for Democrats?
Well, here's a harbinger for what's to come is what happened in District 72 with Margaret Good and James Buchanan, the offspring of Congressman Vern Buchanan. Margaret Good had a decisive victory that year, despite having hundreds of thousands of dollars of negative ads thrown against her. The polls really mean nothing right now, and what the story is that Buchanan's campaign has launched negative ad after negative ad. If they were ahead, they would have gone positive. It's what the campaigns do tells you where that race is headed.
Right, but House 72 really was telling in a lot of different ways, but Jacob, Manatee County is a whole other story here, and so is the southern part of Hillsborough County, which makes up, I believe, 30% of this district.
And it's worth noting that Dave Shapiro did not win the primary in southern Hillsborough County. He did win it by a significant amount in Sarasota. And honestly, if we're being honest, like, all the media is based in Sarasota. So it may be that we're even getting a tainted viewpoint because we're in the strongest Democratic part of the region. That's where we're doing most of our reporting.
On the other hand, let me point this out. David Shapiro is now advertising on other TV stations, I hate to mention them, but in the Tampa area, which is really something because it's very expensive to do, but also, on the air television advertising works, Connie. This is not just another election year. This is a candidate with substantial means behind him.
He does. I'll give you that, and it is very expensive. When we talk about 72, though, I want to go back to that. That was a special election. That's a whole different animal than what we're dealing with a regular primary and general election, which is the cycle we're in now. So we need to look at that.
I'd like to know, because we just did our Where the Votes Are analysis at SRQ Magazine, quick plug, and we were looking at the turnout in every state house district, and actually, in the August election, more Democrats voted in District 72 than voted in February, and fewer Republicans voted in 72 than voted in February. So at least that part of the district, I think you're seeing Democrats really coalesce. I mean, I think a lot of us see the money advantage that Margaret Good has over Ray Pelon right now and think that that race is probably still leaning pretty firmly in Democratic hands. Whether that can extend into Manatee, that's a very hard game for David Shapiro. You are right that the numbers do not balance in that way. No. And when you look at the turnout in August, it wasn't the same story as in 72.
All right, we have to take a quick break. We're going to come back in just a moment. Stay with us. Our guests are going to be joining us for final thoughts, but first, what are you thinking? Digital producer Chloe Conboy is tracking the comments. Chloe.
Alan, we had over 500 votes in our Facebook poll during the show, and 52% say Democrats are more motivated in the midterms than 48% of people saying Republicans are more motivated in the midterms following the Kavanaugh confirmation. The poll will be open for the next 24 hours, so there's still time to vote on the ABC7 Facebook page. Alan, back to you.
Thanks a lot, Chloe. That still continues to say a lot in terms of at least what local folks are thinking about in terms of who is more motivated by the Kavanaugh nomination. Let's talk a couple of minutes about the governor's race. Andrew Gillum has been out there in the area. Both Gillum and DeSantis have been around here. What's your take on this right now, Gabriel, in terms of Gillum, in terms of coalescing the Democratic vote around here and the polls that continuing show that he is leading?
I think the most important vote in the governor's race is the one made by Mother Nature. And with the green sludge coming out of Lake Okeechobee, that is exacerbating the red tide on now both the east and west coast of Florida. People are really fired up. We've had nearly 20 years of Republican rule in Tallahassee. Rick Scott defunded the water management districts as well as the Department of Environmental Protection. So people are fighting back, and that's why the Democrats have a fighting shot this year.
And kind of I'm wondering what your take is, because as we reported earlier this week, Adam Smith from the Tampa Times called the DeSantis campaign wobbly. It seemed unfocused. They were kind of light in terms of a platform and position, but they hired Susie Wiles this week, who ran President Trump's campaign in Florida and did pretty well for himself.
That doesn't seem wobbly.
Right. But, do you think that DeSantis is turning things around? Have you noticed any differences in the last couple of days?
I know, for instance, he's going to be in Sarasota County tomorrow in the afternoon.
That's a good thing.
Yes.
But, comparatively, Mayor Gillum is out there with all sorts of policy positions on a whole lot of things. And up until now, when you would ask Congressman DeSantis specific questions, you would get generalities.
I noticed today he came out with an economic plan for the state of Florida. Obviously, our economy is very revved up. We have the lowest unemployment since 1969. There's a lot going on. And I think that voters are excited about that, and they should be. I look at DeSantis. I know he's endorsed by Trump, so for me as a Republican, that's important. I look at Mr. Gillum. I know that he's involved with Mr. Soros. For me as a Republican, that's a no-no.
Okay. Jacob, you cover these campaigns every time they come to town. Have you noticed any changes? What are you seeing in terms of how the Suncoast and voters here are thinking about this race?
Well, I'll tell you, Gabe is right in the sense that red tide has been a heck of a running mate for the blue wave. Like, that has definitely hurt Republicans because they are the party in power. And while people are making a compelling case, this is a natural phenomenon that they don't have that much control over, I think voters are really anxious about it and want to see somebody do something and promise they can do something about that. And Governor Scott and the Republican Party haven't been able to undo anything or prevent red tide from happening, so they're going to get punished by that to some degree. I do think that, you talked about two upset candidates on the governor's race. Andrew Gillum wasn't expected to win the Democratic nomination either. But definitely Gillum's campaign has become much more organized. Their events feel a lot more solid and professional. And, DeSantis feels like he's just starting to get traction right now. Yes, he's got 4 or 5 stops this weekend across the state. But there's been several weeks when he wasn't doing anything. Andrew Gillum had some weeks where he wasn't doing anything, but he was raising substantial amounts of money. And I think that you can definitely see a marked difference. And I can't remember the last time that the Democrats at the statewide level felt more organized than the Republicans do, but that's the case right now.
So, Gabe, what worries you the most?
Well, here's what really happened on the DeSantis side. He relied on Trump to carry him through the primary, and he's sort of coming off of that Trump sugar high as we move into the general, and it's tough to rebuild a campaign as absentee ballots arrive in people's mailboxes today, tomorrow, and the next day. What worries me the most, Gillum might run into some legal issues in Tallahassee, but the Republicans have already put that out into the open and the voters have rejected it. He's not involved anymore with those investigations, so I'm very bullish on the Gillum candidacy.
Connie, what worries you the most?
As far as the governor's race?
Yep.
The governor's race, I'm excited about DeSantis.
Okay. I mean, what is your take in terms of, the perception is that Gillum has been well organized here. People say that, he is electric on the campaign trail here, and he has been leading since primary day after winning this.
I will tell you, I escaped from California, the People's Republic of California, because of those socialist views. So I am concerned if that's the direction that our state is headed for my living here.
Jacob, you get the final word.
Well, an interesting thing about the word socialism, I think it's been thrown around at anything pro-government for so many years. It's starting to lose meaning with a lot of voters. The thing is, Andrew Gillum has got a lot of energy around his campaign. He's got a cult of personality around him. Ron DeSantis hasn't been able to do that yet.
Okay, we want to thank you all. We want to thank our guests, Democratic strategist Gabriel Hammond, Connie Bruni of the Sarasota Republican Party, and Jacob Ogles of SRQ Magazine.